Are you tired of reading for hours and remembering nothing? Let me show you how to unlock speed and comprehension within just a few minutes. Hey guys, if you're new here, my name is Bogdan and I'm a professor at John Cabot University, Rome. I also used to teach at Oxford and Princeton. Over the years, I noticed that many of my students were struggling with reading complex texts. That's why I decided to put together this video today, in which I'm sharing the best advice or proven strategies to help you understand more effectively, but also remember the details of all the readings that you have to do for school. This advice could also apply to regular people who are trying to remember more effectively the readings that they do. At the end of this video, I'll also give you a live demonstration about how I go about reading and comprehending an article. I hope you find it useful. In the age of artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, you might be wondering if reading is still important. The answer is yes. If you're a student, a professional, or just someone who loves reading, being able to read and synthesize the ideas within a text is hugely important and will set you apart. Being able to read a text effectively and being able to convey that information will let that knowledge become part of you. So that's why following this advice could really set you apart. You can communicate the message of a text to others. You can connect ideas yourself more effectively so you can become more original. This could also lead to new insights and new ideas. And finally, you will be able to recall this information. It is proven that really comprehending a specific text will lead to a better ability to remember and recall that information. Okay, in this first part, I would like to talk about how to read for understanding, meaning how to read for quality purposes. So this will allow to store that information in long-term memory. So reading for comprehension, I would say, can be divided in 3 steps. Read, think, write. So when it comes to reading, the most important thing is not to take notes and not to write while you're reading. You have to read a few paragraphs and then you close that book or that article and you have to think. So this means that you have to think about what you read. It's okay if you only remember 60% of what you read, or it's okay if you do not understand all the words. In the first step, it's important to think about what you just. If you understood less than 60%, then it's probably important to go back and read those paragraphs. After you're done thinking, you should go and try to summarize what you just read, only in a few sentences. So after 3 paragraphs, go to your notes and write a summary of what you read. So this obviously has to be using your own words. This will allow you to store information into memory. Within that writing process, you should also write a critical reflection of what you just read. So not just summarizing what you just read, but also adding some critical reflection. So what is that critical reflection? Is what you read interesting? Does this differ from what you already knew? Is it boring? Is it interesting? Then do you believe the idea? Do you believe what you just read? How would you criticize it? Would you have any suggestions to what you just read? And then how does what you read connect to what you already knew or to other ideas? So these are the steps in order to write that critical reflection. Finally, this whole process of reading, thinking, writing really will allow you to understand the article or the material that you're reading. This will also force you to practice remembering or active recall by closing the original material and forcing you to summarize and then critically reflect on the article will force you to use your memory and help you to recall important information from that article. In this way, you can also speak about the content of the article extemporaneously. So this will allow you to convey the message of that material to audiences in front of other people. So those are the 3 steps for reading for comprehension or reading for quality purposes. Read, think, and write. Now let's talk about reading for quantity. If you're in college or even as a grad student, many times you'll be assigned a lot of readings, a lot of articles, a lot of books. So you may need to find a way in order to cover all this material. So this is where activities such as skimming or focusing on just specific parts of a reading will come at hand. So let's talk about those methods. So in general, skimming in the form of vocalizing, in the form of reading diagonally, for example, or in the form of just reading the first sentence or last sentence of a paragraph, rarely work. So this means that you're not going to be able to store this information into memory. In addition, you will not really fully comprehend the material. So if you have a lot of materials that you need to complete by a specific date, it's important to focus on specific aspects of the paper. So if we're dealing with articles, focus on the introduction and conclusion and the main figures and their captions. So the introduction and conclusion, together with the abstract, will really succinctly summarize what the main question of the paper is, what the main method, what the main contribution is, and overall the main message of that article. The figures and the captions will really give you snippets, the specific details that might be important in order to recall as part of that article. In many subjects such as history, anthropology, or sociology, you might also be assigned books. In some cases, you'll be assigned many books throughout the semester. So this, although this is not necessarily communicated by the professor, it's important to note that you don't have to read those books cover to cover. And this is because these professors typically assume that you already know that you don't have to read all those materials. In addition, it's just not physically possible in certain contexts to read all that material. So if you're dealing with the book, you have to focus again on the introduction and conclusion and then skim the rest, meaning identify the chapter names and look at some important section titles. If you notice that the professor is mentioning specific chapters or specific sections, you may want to go back to those after the class is over. But in principle, here too, after you read the introduction, conclusion, or the abstract, you should still go back and think about what you read and write some important ideas based on what you remember. In addition, also add some critical reflection of what you just read. Is it convincing? Do you find any limitation of what was being said? How is what you just read connected to other ideas that you might already be familiar with? So in this way, you're still able to cover a substantial amount of material, but also understand to some extent the basic message of those readings. Okay, so I'm opening the PDF on my iPad. So I'm just quickly looking at the title, Growing Public, Peter Lindard. I'm just quickly going over the short abstract at the beginning of the book. So remember that I'm just reading it in my head. I mean, it's up to you to decide how you read this, whether it's out loud or just reading it quietly. And then just gradually moving on to, again, the title. You're looking at the table of contents. So let's assume that we have assigned chapter 13, a minimal theory of social transfers. So I'm just basically skimming the structure of the chapter. Okay, and then I'm going to that chapter. So this is that chapter 13, a minimal theory of social transfers. So I'm going to spend time to read the first two paragraphs. Okay, so we just read these two paragraphs. I guess the next step to do is just to think, what did you just read? If you just put the chapter aside, just think about what you just read. Well, you read something about social spending, and then you read some insights about how the author thinks about what he's going to say, who the audience is, how he thinks about the production of his own knowledge. So the next step is to actually go to your notes without looking at what you just read. So you open your notes, either physical or an iPad. So the author is trying to tell us about social spending. He's also trying to theorize about social spending. And then you go back and continue. Okay, so again, here too, the author is trying to present a model about how he's thinking about about social spending, who the relevant actors are, whether they're interest groups or politicians. So it's not quite clear exactly what he's trying to do with this, but it seems that he's trying to introduce a model of social spending in which different actors and different actions are being presented. So then what you do again, you go back to your notes. And now in terms of thinking or kind of critiquing what you just read, let's assume that we just read everything. I guess, to what extent do you find this compelling? Or I guess one obvious objection to this, especially if you're not used to the political economy literature, is the author potentially could explain more clearly what the purpose of the chapter is. Is he trying to conceptualize social spending? Is he trying to provide us with some evidence? So one, simple reservation you could have would be as simple as unclear what the purpose of the chapter is. Is the author offering a new theory? Is the author presenting new evidence? So this is, for example, critical questions that one could address about an article that you just read. I'm not going to go over the entire article right now, but hopefully you get a basic sense of how to read now an article and how to think about what you just read and take notes about it. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please comment down below if you have any additional advice or any systems that you developed that worked for you. I will be very curious to read them. Thank you. See you soon.